Hi, I'm Seth, and this is Paint Your Own Ukulele. I'm going to give you a couple different examples of some really fun ways to paint your ukulele using a Macala standard soprano. Now you can do this with just about any ukulele using just a couple of simple tools that I'm going to walk you through. First, you're going to need a small Phillips head screwdriver. This helps with unwinding and winding up your strings, but isn't necessary. Marker, some masking tape, and something to keep all your parts and pieces together. The first thing we're going to do is take the strings off, but we need to make a note of which one is which, starting with the G, followed by C, E, and A strings. Now I'm ready to unwind them. Go ahead and twist the tuning key while plucking the string. You should notice the sound change. You want to go ahead and loosen all your strings. And if you happen to have one of these keys, it helps things move along a little quicker. Now that you've loosened all the strings and removed them from the tuning pegs, you can now take them off of the bridge. Go ahead and loosen up the strings at the bridge. Just don't remove them all the way quite yet. I want to make sure that you've got a way to remember which one is which. Make a mental note of how they're twisted and strung, or take a picture. Once you get to the thinnest, or the G string, go ahead and remove it. Now, with your masking tape and your marker, notate your G string. Be sure to keep all your pieces together. Now you can do the same with your C, E, and A strings. Now a good way to avoid all of this is just to buy yourself a fresh set of strings that are clearly labeled straight out of the packaging. Next, I'm going to carefully remove the saddle. You don't have to remove the saddle, but you would have to mask over the top of the bridge and the saddle before you paint. Now, if you're planning on painting the headstock, you're going to want to remove the tuning pegs and anything around them. Next, you're going to need your small Phillips head screwdriver. Most ukuleles have two small screws holding each tuning peg in place. Some only have one. Only need to remove the small screws, not the larger one that's holding the gear in place. Now I have all the tuning pegs off and all my pieces in one place. I'm ready to prep the surface for painting. Any part of the ukulele that you plan on painting needs to be lightly sanded. This is to ensure that whatever you paint the ukulele with, whether it be acrylic, markers, or spray paint, Posca pens, pencil even, will stick to the surface. Once you've finished sanding, now you're ready for some masking. There's several types of masking tape, various widths, but primarily I'll just be using this one. Before applying the masking tape, you want to make sure that your ukulele is dust-free. The first part of the ukulele that I'm going to mask off is the fretboard. I don't want to get any paint on there because I still want the ukulele to sound good. Next, I'm going to mask around the neck and the body of the ukulele, basically covering any parts that I do not want to get any paint or clear coat spray on. On this particular ukulele, I did not remove the saddle from the bridge, so that means I'm going to have to mask around it because I don't want to get any paint on that either. That will affect the sound of the instrument. Now that my ukulele is all masked off, I'm about ready to get started painting. I could also put some newspaper inside the sound hole to protect that from getting anything inside. Here are 5 Macala sopranos that I have already prepped in different types of ways with different masking tapes to give you a few different examples of ways to paint your uk. Now you could dive straight into the colors. Or if you're like me, you like to do a little planning. Grab a marker or a pen or even a pencil and start marking on your ukulele, laying out the design that you wish to paint. I personally like to use a pencil because if you use it light enough, it is actually still erasable. The first ukulele I'm going to paint, I'm going to start with spray paint. I use gloves and an aerosol mask for protection. Before you start with your spray paint, make sure that all your masking tape lines are clean and sharp. Also make sure your cans are well shaken before you start spraying. You want to apply even coats, not too close and not too slowly. You don't want the paint to build up and drip. You can layer your colors and fade them together as well. After mixing a few colors together on the surface of this uke, now I'm going to spray some white onto my fingertips and flick it on, creating the effect of stars in a galaxy. Alright, so I've spray painted my ukuleles. Now I'm ready to embellish them with my Posca pens. Poscas are awesome water-based paint markers that need to be well shaken before they're used. Now on this particular ukulele, I'm going to paint a few waves and some palm trees. Now if you don't have Posca pens, that's okay. You can also do this part of the process with Sharpie markers, acrylic paints, or even colored pencils. Now this particular ukulele didn't have any spray paint on it, but the next couple I'll give you an example of what one looks like that does. On this next one, you'll notice that I used some of that thin masking tape. I'm going to go ahead and remove that now. On this next one, I covered the top half to give it an above and below water look. Now I'm going to show you a few ways that you can use stencils to spruce up your oud too. You can make your own stencils using various materials and a sharp X-Acto knife. Or you can go out and buy some at your local crafting store. I'm going to start with this simple Eva bird on the headstock. Just like when applying the spray paint before, use quick overlapping strokes and make sure you don't build up the paint too much so that you get a clean image. This is one of the store-bought stencils that I'm using to give a bit of texture to the background. You can also double up your stencils. Lots of different creative ways that you can use stencils. Now I'm going over the top of my spray paint background with Posca pens. You can also do this with Sharpie markers or acrylic paints. Here are my 5 examples now that I've painted their backgrounds and then put the details on top. Now we're ready to clear coat. I like to use a Rust-Oleum clear gloss spray. Make sure that your uke is dust free and that all of your masking tape is still in place. Just like when using other spray paints, make sure your can is well shaken and use quick overlapping strokes, being careful not to let the paint build up and drip. You're going to want to put on at least 3 coats, giving about 15 minutes to 30 minutes between each coat to dry. Now that you've got at least 3 layers of clear coat on there, your painting should be nice and protected. If by chance you didn't sand your ukulele enough in the beginning of the process, you might have a little texture show up like this last one. I'm going to put 3 more layers of clear coat on these ukuleles, but before I do, I'm going to give them a quick sand with a 320 grit fine sandpaper. This is going to help get rid of any remaining texture, and when you put the final coats of clear on there, they'll be very glossy. Once I've put my final clear coats on the ukulele, it's now time to take the masking tape off with a razor blade or my X-Acto knife. Once you've carefully removed the majority of your masking tape, you can use a piece of it to actually remove any residue or tape sticky glue that might still be left over. Lastly, before you start to put your ukulele back together again, use your fine grit 320 sandpaper again and go right around the edges where the tape and the clear coat met. Now we're finally ready to put our ukulele back together. If you've taken apart your headstock in order to paint it, you will first need to replace your tuning keys. Typically there are 4 tuning keys, 2 for the left and 2 for the right. It's important that you line up the holes correctly so that the screws go back in nicely into their former positions. Once your tuning keys are in their correct position, you can now get your small Phillips head screwdriver and begin slowly screwing in your small screws. Only screw them in about halfway until you have both in place and then tighten both of them. Tighten the screws until they are finger tight. You don't want to over screw them to strip the holes. The next step will then be to carefully replace the saddle if you had taken it out. You can replace any of the other parts that you may have removed from the tuning keys. I tend to not replace these as I don't like them aesthetically and they're not necessary. Now we're ready to restring the uke. We're going to start with the G, then the C, then the E, then the A strings. Feed the string through the bottom of the bridge until you have just a little bit left and put a kink in it. At the kink, twist the string 3 times. Keep pinching the twist in the string while making a loop to feed the long end of the string through. Once your string is nice and snug at the bridge, you're ready to go ahead and attach it to the tuning post. Feed the string through the inside hole, loop it around, and then put it through the same hole once again. Pull the string tight with one hand while turning the tuning key counterclockwise, tightening the string. Once you have all 4 strings on your headstock, it should look something like this. Here are my 5 finished ukuleles. I hope this video was helpful and you're able to go now and have some fun creating your own one-of-a-kind uke.